Hey guys, so I was going through my old computer and I found a few videos that I made for classes that I taught that I never put up on YouTube. So this is the first one of those, and it deals with digitizing, kind of like digitizing theory, talking about doing proper pathing and stuff for your designs. And I rewatched it, thought it was pretty good, so I'm uploading it. It's about 6 months old. I think that this was the last, or maybe two versions of Floriani ago that I was doing this, but I don't think there's anything majorly different for the purposes of this video in the software, so it should work. But anyway, I'm gonna put all the ones that I found on my computer that I never put up on YouTube for whatever reason, and I'll have those coming up in the next week or so, and hope you enjoy it. So I'm going to start the video now. Hope to see you in the next one. Hey everybody, it's Brad with another Floriani Total Control U video for you today. Today we're going to be doing a pathing exercise. I know a lot of you guys that have Floriani that bought it here in our store are relatively new users, but this exercise is good for anyone to practice your pathing. So we're going to be digitizing a little outline design of a hippopotamus, and open up your software and hit create a new design on your My Floriani Today page. Okay, and there's one thing that I want you to do before we start, and that is to go up to your tools settings up here in the tools toolbar across the top and go down to the bottom, preferences. Now if you already did this in class today, then obviously disregard this, but if you're watching this and you weren't in class, then you want to do this. Go to, let's see, what's under digitizing. Hang on. There we go. It's under environment, okay? And I want you to put a check mark here next to automatically select created paths, okay? It drives me crazy when when it doesn't automatically select things that we draw, and so we're going to turn this on, which is not on by default. So just make sure you got a check mark next to that. It's under preferences, environment, automatically create selected paths, and just hit OK. All right, so the picture that we're going to be digitizing, I will have a link to it in this description of this video if you're watching on YouTube, or it will be in the same place that I put the video on your computer if you were in class. We're going to go to the backdrop tool here on the left-hand side. It is the one that looks like a little mountain scene, and navigate to wherever that picture is on your computer. It is this one here. It's oh, I guess he's not a hippopotamus. I guess he's more of a rhinoceros. It doesn't matter. We're going to left click that and hit open, and this is our design. So let's take a look at this. It's black and white design, just outlines only, and we're not going to fill him in. We're going to do just the outlines, because what we're really worried about is not making an embroidery design that we necessarily want to sew out, but in looking at the thought process that goes behind why you do one element of a design before another. So imagine this is already an embroidery design and it's sewing out, and imagine that this outline around his head were to sew out first, and then this outline of his body were to sew out second, meaning this part here would either be perfectly lined up, which is pretty unlikely, with this outline here, or more likely this would be slightly overlapping this. That wouldn't look good if it were to overlap that slightly, because in looking at it, this part is in front of this part if we're thinking about the rhinoceros as a 3D object. So we wouldn't want to do this part. No, we wouldn't want to do the head and then the body. We'd want the body line here to sew out first. And similar to the outline around his little feet here, because we want this stitch to tuck neatly behind this stitch. Now, why can't they all be one stitch? Well, if we're digitizing with a satin stitch, we can't have one satin stitch that is going both this direction and this direction. So this has to be a separate object from this, and actually all his little toes and all of that kind of stuff. So what you want to do is look at it and think of it in layers, kind of. What is in front of what? And if I look at this, I would say that probably I would start with this part of the design, the body, and but I also, if say, let's just say, I could start basically anywhere I want. I could start on this side, I could start on this side. But let's say I also am looking at this, and if I'm digitizing and the design goes this way, and then I go to here and then to here, well, I'm actually bypassing these little toes, which also have to go down before this part, the feet. So what I'm thinking about is digitizing, starting here and then traveling down the body, and then come down and do the feet, or not the feet, do the toes, and then this side of the body, and then we'll worry about where to go from there next. And then the other thing that we want to think about when we're digitizing is we want to minimize the amount of jump stitches or jump stitch trims that we create. And the way we're going to achieve that is by combining our satin stitches with some hidden running stitches, and those are called pathing stitches, that allow the machine not to have to stop between, say, this area and the toes, and this area and these toes and this area. So we're gonna be thinking about pathing and digitizing as we go. So to start, we're going to be using the direct digitizing tools for this exercise, and those are the tools that are in this little menu here. And if you don't see this, that means you're not using the most current version of Floriani. You need to go and download the latest version. Quickly, if you just go up to Help and choose Check for Updates, that will guide you through. Essentially, you're going to click on that. It'll open a web page. You can download the latest version, run the executable file there. Make sure you close the software before you run the updater, and then come back and start the video over again. Anyway, so the tool that we need is in Digitizing Tools, and when I say direct digitizing, that means that when I hit this option that I choose in here, it will, when I draw my line, it will automatically convert it to the chosen type of stitch. So anyway, we're gonna left click on this, a little flyout menu will come out, and the first tool that we're going to be using is this one here, the steel stitch. This is a satin outline stitch is what this type of stitch is. So if we left click on this, our cursor becomes a little crosshair, and what this is going to do is it's going to allow us to place points down where we want the line to be, basically. Okay, so this right here, this curve is the first thing we're going to digitize, and we're going to left click at the first part of the line that we want it to start at, and I want it to start right here, and I want to be kind of right in the middle of the headline right here, so that it's going to overlap slightly. So I'm going to left click one time here, boom, and you see a little blue dot has shown up there. That's where my first point is, and we could go and click like this around this line, but that's not going to give us a perfect curve. You see my points don't line up exactly perfectly if I do that. I'm going to hit the backspace key on my keyboard to back up to my first point. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go straight down to where I want the end line to be, right here. I want the end of the line to be right here. I'm going to left click right there. So I've got one point clicked here and one point clicked here. Then I'm going to right click with my mouse. Boom. That generates a satin stitch line from here to here. And then I'm going to go down to the bottom of this selection bar here. You see this little icon down here at the bottom? That is my shortcut to my shape tool. And what the shape tool is going to allow me to do is pull on this line to create a curve out of it. So we're going to left click on this little button here, boom, and now we see this purple indicates the artwork line that the satin stitch is following. Okay, and all we're going to do is we're going to move our mouse somewhere over that purple line, and we're going to left click and drag it over until it matches with my black outline that I'm tracing. Right? So we see that my purple line now matches with that line, and if I want to generate this so that the stitches are now going to follow that line, you right click one time, boom, there we go. Now if you need to make any further adjustments at this time, you can. You can move this around as much or as little as you want, and it doesn't have to match 100% exactly, but if you want to get it to match 100% exactly, then you can mess with this little handle here and this little handle here. Those are called Bezier handles, and what they allow you to do is adjust one part of the line without affecting the other half of the line. So if I grab this, I can move it so that it even more closely lines up with my black outline. Again, it doesn't need to match up 100% perfectly because no one's going to see your original artwork and lay your embroidery over it to see whether it matches up to the millimeter. But some people are anal, I know I am, and want to get it exactly right. So just make sure you right-click to generate after you move your point to take a look at where the stitches end up. And you can scroll with your mouse wheel to take a closer look if you want to zoom in a little bit. And then I'm just going to, when I'm done with this, basically if I go and choose another tool here, then it will exit this selection, or I could hit the select tool over here and it will get rid of that purple line also. Now I'm going to zoom back out here in my program. I'll zoom a little bit in on my editing program when I'm ready. Or actually, you know what I think I'm going to do? I'm going to zoom in so that I have this as big as possible and still be able to see the entire thing. The way you would achieve that is to go over on the left here and use your magnifying glass tool. And then you can left click and drag a box around your entire image, and it will just zoom you in just so that you can see the entirety of the image that you're digitizing. Okay, anyway, so now I have my first line. It is this steel stitch from here to here, and it starts at this point and it stops at this point. And I know that because when you're using the steel stitch tool in the direct digitizing menu, the first click is always the start point and the last click is always the stop point. So I know that my design starts here and currently stops here. And where we need to go from here is to go and look into these toes. These toes are the next thing that need to be digitized. So let's take a look at the toes. I'm gonna zoom in, and we're gonna look up close at. Well, actually, before I do that, well, no, I'm gonna look at the toes first. I'm sorry, getting ahead of myself. I do want to look at the toes, so I'm gonna zoom in, and we're gonna take a look at these. So. Forgetting about how we get the stitches down to here, we're going to look at these. So if I start on this toe and I start the satin stitch here and bring it to here, we could then travel down to here and bring the stitch around this way to here. We see how this is one unbroken curve, whereas this curve stops here. So we start here and then we travel down and we bring the stitch up and around here, okay, and then we travel from here over to here. But wait a minute, if we look, this is in the front. So if I go and start a satin stitch here and I let it overlap, it's going to overlap this. So we don't actually want to go from left to right on this. Instead, what we want to do is do the left, then the right, then the middle to get the layering properly. And so let's go ahead and do that. So first thing we do, let me zoom back out to the same level of zoom that I was before. We'll go ahead and use the magnifier to draw this like that. And we need to get a traveling stitch from here to here, which is where we're going to start. So let's see, digitizing tools, and we're going to use a run stitch for that. Now this run stitch doesn't need to be as pretty as our satin stitches are because it's going to be hidden. And what we need is to have it start right where the stop was, which is there. And because it doesn't need to be pretty, we're just going to left click along kind of a center line in this black outline, and it doesn't need to be a perfect curve. Okay, and we just right click to generate that. Just like a steel stitch, a run stitch starts at your first click and stops at your last click. So that's the first step. Now let's see, I'll zoom back in on the toes so you can see what I'm doing here, and go up to the digitizing tools and choose the steel stitch again. Now, we're going to start this right here, and again, we're starting inside of the outline so that this overlaps slightly. And I'm just going to do another stitch right, or another click rather, right in the middle of where this satin stitch eventually will be. And then you're going to right click to generate. We're going to use the shape tool found at the bottom of our selection box, and left click and drag till our outlines line up. And you see they don't perfectly line up along the center the whole way, so we can use these Bezier handles to get it dead perfect. Okay, that looks pretty good. Yeah, we'll just right click and generate that. Yeah, so that follows the line pretty well. And now we just need to get over to the other side. I'm going to pan over a little bit here, and that's easily enough done if we just draw a run stitch from here to here. So back up to Digitizing Tools, Run Stitch, and we're going to left click here and just get us over to the other side. Just like that. So that starts here, that stops there, and we're going to do the same thing, just in reverse. We go back up to Digitizing Tools, choose Steel Stitch, and put a left click about here, and then a left click about here. Right click to generate. There's our steel stitch, and to pull the shape out, we're going to left click right here and left click and drag. Adjust our Bezier handles, just left click on them, and get that curve so that it's just about right through the center of the curve on the picture. Right click to generate that and take a look. Looks pretty good, pretty good. So this starts here, stops here. And now we're just going to travel back around this side right to about here. All right, so how do we do that? Back up to Digitizing Tools and use the Run Stitch tool again, and just go ahead and start where this one stops. Travel us back around to about here is fine. Right click to generate that. If you ever want to go and check to make sure that your starts and stops are in the right place, anytime you use the select or the shape tool, it will show you the green is your start, the red is your stop. Okay, so you can just trust though that the steel stitch and the run stitch tools will always work this way, because they do. Anywho, where was I? Steel stitch from here to here. Now this one is a little bit trickier to draw perfectly. Actually, I guess not, because I was adjusting the shapes for those. But we're going to use the steel stitch. I'm going to put one here and one here. Try to get your line so that it's roughly perfectly horizontal. Doesn't have to be dead perfect though. And then right click, shape tool, pull that curve out. Now this one we really have to adjust. Okay, so you're going to have to be moving these Bezier handles pretty far on both sides, and then move that line some more. And here I don't have it quite enough. You see how this is real close to this edge here? I'm going to pull that out a little bit more, and then to compensate for that, we pull this side out a little bit more, and then we move. And then let's see how this looks. We're going to right click to generate, and that looks good enough for me. And now this is going to overlap the ends of these two. We'll put it in 3D so we can see that. See how that overlaps those? That's how we want that to look. We don't want to have these guys overlapping that. And if we weren't careful about what order we digitize in and how we path the design, then we may end up with a less than desirable result for how our outlines are going to look. So, next step. I'm going to zoom out a little bit here. The next area we're going to go is right here. So we need to travel from this point up to here, where we're going to draw our next steel stitch. Okay, so to travel, we use a run stitch. Digitizing Tools, Run Stitch. We're going to start right where this one stopped. And remember, this part is all getting covered up by an eventual satin stitch that's going to come around here. So we're going to go here. And then, no, we're not going to go there, because that's where the steel stitch needs to be. We just right click. Okay, perfect. And then we're going to go back to the Digitizing Tools and choose a steel stitch. And we're just going to go from right about the middle of this line to right about the middle of this line. And then right click to generate. Now this, it has a bit of a curve to it in the picture, so we want to make sure that we go in and bend this out a little bit to give it a bit of a curve. Now that's actually probably a little overkill. There we go. That's pretty good. Good enough for me anyway. And then we are going to travel from here down to here. We're going to do the exact same thing that we did on this side, but we're going to do it on the other side. Exact same order. So we just go back up to the Digitizing Tools, use the Run Stitch. We're going to travel from here down to here. Right click, back up to Digitizing Tools and choose the Steel Stitch again. And we're going to left click here, we're going to left click here, right click to generate that, left click on the shape tool. Now again, if you accidentally click somewhere else, people do this in my class all the time. If you accidentally lose, oh no, where's my selection box, where's my shape tool? You can always just go in your sequence view and look for the most recent object, left click on that, and there it will be. So we're going to left click on our shape tool, grab our line, pull it out, adjust our Bezier handles so it looks nice and pretty. We want that line running straight through the middle of our outline. Right click to generate that. Lovely. Now we're going to travel over to the other side. I'm going to pan a little bit to the right. So we're going to travel now from here to here using, you guessed it, the running stitch. So we left click there, 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 and there. And then we're going to right click to generate. And now we're going to just do the same thing. We're going to go from here down to here, just like we did on the other side. So that's Digitizing Tools and Steel Stitch. We're going to left click here and here, right click. Okay. And if we hadn't have gone into our preferences and set it to auto select, we would have to be selecting each of these objects as we draw them, which is super irritating. So anyway, left click on the shape tool, left click and drag up into here, adjust our Bezier handles. Very good. Right click to generate that. Wonderful. And back to Digitizing Tools, run stitch, and travel, 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 travel. Right click, back up to Digitizing Tools, Steel Stitch again, and again we just do 2 points here and here, and then right click to generate that, left click on the shape tool shortcut, drag that up here, and then we're going to drag our Bezier handles out to make a nice fat curve. And again, you may need to adjust one and then the other until everything's perfect, and then move our curve up, right click to generate that. Wonderful. Look how lovely that is, and logical. It actually sews out in a logical fashion. I love it. Okay, so now we need to get to where our next line is going to be, which is going to be this part of his body. So let's see. We'll go ahead and where's the end of this? Right here. So we're going to use the Digitizing Tools and the run stitch, and we're just going to go ahead and click our way through. And when you're doing this, you want to make sure that your clicks aren't too close together. You want them to be spaced out a little bit, like I've done here. Don't want to go click, 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 click. That's not how you do it. And then we're going to right click there. Starts there, stops there. And just like our first line, we're going to bring this one in using the steel stitch and just click from right here to about right here. Right click to generate that. Use the select or the shape tool and drag our curve out, making sure to adjust our Bezier handles such that it matches the artwork pretty well. And I need to adjust this a little bit more. Oh geez, I just added a point. If you double click, then it actually will add a point. So look what I've done. I've actually added a point here. I didn't mean to do that. You can either undo by hitting the undo button, or you can right click on a point and delete it. Let's see. Just trying to get this perfect. Like I said, I'm kind of anal. Alright, so that's pretty good. We'll right click to generate that, and we can see that our outline now is going exactly where we want it to go. Wunderbar. Alright, so what other little bits of pathing do we have in here? You know, I think that the complicated bit was dealing with his toes and his feet, because now we can do the entire outside of his head and the entire of his feet. So, and then, you know, we'll work on his face after that. Now, there's gonna be jump stitches, or jump stitch trims, as the case is for most people's machines nowadays. And what we're doing is trying to minimize them. So there's going to be a separation between this and this. There's no way to path it because everything is going to be showing at that point. But that's okay. We like I said, we just want to minimize them. We can't always eliminate them entirely. And you don't want to, you know, create something ugly by like bridging a little bridging a little run stitch between areas that aren't going to be covered up. So I'm not worried about the fact that, you know, these are going to be you know, not connected to anything by pathing. But anyway, so let's see. I guess it doesn't really matter whether I do the outline of his head or his feet first. So we're already right here. Actually, it does matter because if we're stopping right here, this is our stop point now. So we actually want to do the head next, and we want to make sure that it starts right here. But we're not going to start drawing it right here. This is what's called a closed shape, meaning there's no definite beginning and end of this shape. So I can move the start point to anywhere and it will end up being the same. So I find it easier to draw a shape like this by starting on a cusp point, which is one of these points right here that kind of makes this angle where two curves split away from it. So I'm just going to start drawing it right here. There's no you know, real reason for that other than it's where I feel like starting. But we're going to go up back to our digitizing tools, to our steel stitch, and I'm going to put my first point here, and then from here to here is just one uninterrupted curve. So we're going to just draw and kind of get right there, and to the next cusp there, and then this whole thing is one big curve. So we're just going to go straight across to here, and then we can actually close our shape at this point. And we haven't done any closed shapes yet, but when you close a shape, you always want to use the closed shape tool, especially when you're doing a satin stitch outline, because otherwise you end up with an open shape with ends that overlap and it looks stupid. So just trust me on that. And to close your shape, there's a shortcut. It is Shift C. Shift C closes your shape. There we go. Okay, so now we've got a trapezoid. Hey, Brad, that's a trapezoid. That's not a rhino head. Remember, we can pull our curves out using this button right here. Okay, now everything's purple. We can left click and drag this one down. And to make it rounded the way that it's supposed to be, we use these Bezier handles just like we did on the other side there. And then the other one is here. And we get those so they're lined up fairly well. And then we can pull this down. And then just keep adjusting our Bezier handles until it looks perfect. And then stretch our line down. It's a dance, certainly, because when you fix one part, more often than not, you mess up another part. But you know, just by sitting here and messing with it, you'll get it so that it's close enough. That looks good enough for me, anyway. And then let's do this ear. Same thing. Pull it out. Adjust your Beziers. Pull it out some more. Adjust your Beziers some more, unless you're good like me. I'm just kidding. And then we pull this up. That one I don't need to adjust Beziers on, I think. It looks pretty good the way it is. And then we pull this one up and adjust our Bezier handles. There we go. Whoop. Good enough for me. Okay, we're going to right click to generate that. Boom. Looks pretty good, pretty good. I'm going to take a look here. Yeah, it's nicely overlapped. Wonderful. That's gonna go good. All right, so now from here we don't have anywhere to go. We can't path from. Oh, wait a minute. What did I forget? What did I forget? I forgot to check my start and stop points. Now, the program is actually pretty darn smart. So I started clicking over here, but my stop point of my last one was right here. Let's see if the program was smart enough to put my start and stop points, or to put my start point in the right place. It wasn't. It put it over here. You stupid program. All right, so we left click on this and drag it over there. Now, the green dot, that's your start point. And like I said, you want to have that right next to the stop point on the previous line. Okay, so there we go. Now, my stop point over here doesn't really matter because the next thing that we do, the machine is going to have to make a trim no matter what, because there's nothing that's connecting to this line. These guys here and his feet, they are separate objects entirely. They're not touching any other object, so we can't travel to them. So as long as the machine's already up here at this point, there's no reason to go down here and then back up here. So we'll go ahead and do his inner ears first. So we're going to use, again, the steel stitch under Digitizing Tools, steel stitch. We're going to left click here and here, and even though this is one curve, in order to get this curve, I'm going to have to put a point here, because we can't just do a straight line and then pull it up, because then we don't have this line. So we need at least 3 points to do a closed shape. So right here, and then we're going to close the shape, Shift C for that, and then we will use our shape tool to go ahead and I'm going to actually zoom in a little bit here. I'm going to use my scroll wheel on my mouse and then the arrow keys on my keyboard to pan over to where I need to be. I'm going to pull this side out, and then I'm going to pull this side out, and then right click to see how that looks. We'll just move this point a little bit, and that actually looks pretty good. Sometimes you end up with a weird kink in here if you have an extra point, and you can right click on that point and delete it, and then pull your curve back out, and then we've got this shape with only 2 points, right? So sometimes you'll get a weird little twinge in there, and that's how you get rid of it. But you have to start out with that point, because in order to let the program know that there needs to be another line out here, it has to have a point to start with. All right, so start and stop points on this don't really matter, so we're just going to pan over to the next side, do the same thing, use the Digitizing Tools and the Steel Stitch tool. We're going to go bum, 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 Shift C, Shape tool, pull out our little curves like that, and then I'm going to delete this point again, and then move my curve to exactly the way I want it, and right click, take a look. Looks pretty good, pretty good. I like it. Alright, so let's do his little footsies down here. Now, his footsies are kind of odd shapes, and they're entirely curves. There's no hard point at all in these. So there's a couple of ways to approach this. One is to have to adjust the properties of our points, because if we start drawing our steel stitches, the first point that we draw is always going to be a corner point, and we'd have to right click and adjust the properties of that. So instead of messing with that, I'm actually going to cheat a bit, and I'm going to use the shape tool over here. This will let me bring in a shape, right? And the only shape that we have that doesn't have hard points, it doesn't have any cusps, is a circle, an ellipse. We're going to left click on that and just go ahead and draw it roughly on top of where his little footsie is. Doesn't have to match it perfectly at all. And then we're going to use the shape tool down here. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to move the 4 points in such a way that it roughly matches the way that my outline is, and then we're going to move the curves around and move the points around if we have to, so that it matches my outline. Notice this one here, when I adjust this side, it twiddles this side a little bit. Okay, so you got to be careful. You can't move them too much at a time, because everything affects everything else on this type of shape. See how I click this and we get Bezier handles here and here? Everybody's affecting everybody else. So you gotta twinge everything very carefully. But once you get it to look about like you want it, this really is too far towards the edge. I need to get this closer to the inside. That's pretty good. Right click that and right click it again. Hey, what do you... Oh no, did I draw this as artwork? I did. I accidentally drew this. Oh duh, no! Brad, you moron. You use the artwork ellipse tool. It's not going to be a satin stitch until we convert it to a satin stitch. So we've been dealing with the direct digitizing tools this entire time. I just forgot that we weren't doing that anymore. So what we're going to use is the convert two digitizing buttons, because right now this is artwork. We need to convert it to a stitch, and the convert to buttons are all down along the bottom. Now they don't operate unless you're in the select tool, and right now we're in the shape tool. So we need to go over here to the select tool on the upper left hand side, left click it. Now the object is selected, and we see all of these buttons down here are lit up, and the one we want is the third one from the left, steel. Boom. Creates the exact same thing that the other one created. It just converts artwork to it instead of directly digitizing it. So that's pretty cool. And notice that this shape and this shape are completely symmetrical, and that is handy because it took us a while to get that shape exactly perfect, and I don't want to have to do it again, especially because the chances that I would get it looking exactly the same as I did last time are pretty much zero. So what do? We can just copy and paste this this object, or there's a shortcut down here at the bottom left hand side of my selection box. You see this right here? This is a copy button. It duplicates the selected object. So if I left click on that, boom, we've got another one, and we can just drag him over to this side. Only thing is, he's the wrong image because it's a mirror image of this side. So what we have to do is actually flip this around. And the way you do that, if you need to flip it on the vertical, which is what we need to do here, you use, oh, I just accidentally used my scroll wheel on my mouse. Darn it. All right, what we do is we click this icon here, flip horizontal, and boom, there we go. We just have to move it so that it lines up perfectly with our outline. Yeah, that looks pretty good to me. It's overlapping everything it needs to overlap. It's symmetrical with the other side. Hooray, that looks great. Okay, so now we've got his face. So we have, let's see, we have a couple of circles, and we have these dots in the eyes, and we've got his little rhinoceros horn here. So let's take a look. What should go down first? Well, clearly the rhinoceros horn is on top of the eye, so we should do the eyes first. Now this eye is an uninterrupted circle, and this eye is a broken circle. So how do we deal with that? Well, there's a couple of different ways that we could go about it. For this one, we'll just use a circle. The same like we did before. We'll use the ellipse tool, just like we did. And we're going to draw a circle. Now, if you don't know the secret trick to drawing circles on computers, pay attention, because here it is. When you draw a circle on a computer, you don't start with the top left part of the circle and then try and draw your circle on top of it. See how it doesn't match up perfectly? Instead, I'm going to delete this, just hit this X here. Instead, what you want to do is look at the circle as if it were inside of a square. And you want to start drawing it right where this and this would meet in a square going around that circle. So go up and grab my ellipse tool again, and we're going to come out to about here. And we're going to left click and drag, and look at that. Matches up much closer. I didn't do it exactly dead perfect, but it would have been slick if I had. So we're going to nudge this down. We're going to nudge this over a little bit and make it so that it is right inside, right to the inside of that black line. Lovely. And again, convert to buttons down here. We're going to use the steel stitch. Boom. Okay, that's that one done. But what about this one? This is broken, right? This doesn't this doesn't make a perfect circle. Well, we could, of course, go into our digitizing tools, use our steel stitch, click once here and once here, right click, use the shape tool, and drag it out and use our Bezier handles to make this look perfect. It's probably going to take a few tries though, and see how this, it just doesn't want to do it. Okay, I'm going to have to sit here and keep messing with it until I get a perfect circle out of that, which could take forever. So I'm not going to do it that way. Instead, we're going to take this circle that we already have that's perfect, and we're going to duplicate it, boom, and we're going to move it right on top of where this other circle is. Okay, then we're going to use the shape tool, and we're going to create our own points. We're going to double left click rather on the line right here, and double left click on the line right here, right where it needs, right where the overlap is. And then we're going to right click on one of our created points and choose split line. And then we're going to right click on our other created point and choose split line. And now if we look on our sequence view, we can see that this piece is now made up of two pieces, this part and this part. And all we got to do is delete the part that we don't want anymore. Haha! How about that? We've got a perfect circle, and we just cut part of it out, and it's still going to get overlapped by the rhinoceros horn perfectly, and everything is wonderful. So the only thing we got to do is make sure that our stop point for this steel stitch is somewhere within the outline of the rhinoceros horn. So we're going to use the shape tool, and look, it is. The stop point is right here. Wonderful. So we just got to make sure that I put my stop point for this, or my start point for my rhinoceros horn needs to be right there. Okay, let's draw the rhino horn in. Not that tool, digitizing tools and steel stitch. I'm going to start on a cusp like I always do there. And then I'm actually going to put a line straight to here, because this is a straight line. I don't want this curve to start till it gets to about there. And then this would be a tricky curve to pull out completely. So I'm going to go just to about here, because that's going to be one curve, and then I'll make from here to, say about here another curve. And then I'm going to go to here, and then I'm going to close this shape. Shift C. Okay, let's see how we do with this. Shape tool to the rescue, and we're going to pull this curve out. Have to mess with the Bezier handle on this side. Shift it over a little bit, mess with it a little bit more. Maybe mess with this side a little bit. Get that so that it's right in the middle of my outline shape. That's fairly good. And then this one, we'll pull this out again, mess with the Bezier until it's got that kind of fatness to it that we're looking for. Okay, that's pretty good. That's a straight line. This is this one. Okay, and we just mess with these Bezier handles just a little bit. Maybe move one of the points a little bit. And that's pretty good. And then for this part, we drag this up. That stays a straight line. And mess with our Bezier handles there and there. Now that's a little more rounded than it is in the graphic. So what we could do is put a point in, double click, and move that up, and then we can adjust these curves and their Beziers without affecting the other side too much. And I just right click to generate that. And we want to make sure that we put our start right there. Our stop doesn't matter. And look, we've created a weird jump in here. That happens sometimes if your start and your stop point are in places that the machine doesn't like. So we're going to just take our stop point and move it somewhere else and see whether that gets rid of that. It did. And lovely. Everything is good. Okay, all we got left are the dots of his eyes and his nose. Okay, so all we got to do for these guys is use the ellipse tool, and this time instead of using the steel stitch, we are going to be using the fill stitch when we generate them. So I'm going to go back in here, use the ellipse tool again. Remember, we go more like it is a box we're dragging around. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger than the artwork is. Fill stitches kind of pull a little bit. Some satin stitches do too. But I'm going to make it a little bit bigger and then just fill that down here. This button here is standard fill. These are actually small enough. We may be able to get away with making that a steel stitch or a satin stitch, but I'm not going to. We're going to duplicate this and put it right around the other one. There we go. And then we're going to go down here. Now these are ovals. These aren't perfect circles, but we can draw ovals too. So ellipse tool, and we just draw an oval shape like that. And one of the things that we have is this little button right here. It's a little blue dot, and this lets us rotate a given object. So we rotate it to just about match that nostril. Oh, look at that. Oh man, I am good at this. It's almost like I've done it before. There we go. We've got our oval over there. I know I didn't make it a little bit bigger, but praise me for how well I drew the oval. and we go down and choose this icon here, standard fill. Well, same deal, duplicate it, bring it over to here, and then we're going to mirror image it like that. Pretty good. So we've just created this design and we pathed it intelligently, and it will sew out with a minimum amount of jump stitches. And that's a big part of what digitizing is, digitizing well anyway, is thinking about the way that you're going to approach the design from the very beginning. You don't want to just start randomly digitizing one part of your design. You want to think methodologically about how you're going to do the design from the beginning, because otherwise you end up like I did a couple of times in this video, which I'm probably going to edit out, where I had to go back and start over because I did something stupid. So you probably won't see that happen, but you will probably notice a couple of points where the audio jumps, and that's because I had to edit out some dumb things that I did. So you want to think about it from the beginning, kind of just trace out your movements right from the start. So anyway, I hope that this video is helpful to some of you, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.